program. And of course, tonight is another packed one as we feature three interesting topics, including the state of emergency and its impact on Trinidad and Tobago and other Caribbean countries. Of course, the Emancipation Support Committee's Youth Agricultural Program is also up for discussion. And of course, the Obaala Festival. And we have a special guest with us here this evening. But it gives me great pleasure right now to welcome the crew. Welcome back, everyone. Shabaka Kambon, Dr. Fergus, and of course, Renee Francois. Hi, good evening, guys.
Good evening, Ruskin.
Yes, good evening, Ruskin, and of course, welcome back, all of us. We're glad to be back.
Good to have you back.
Yes, indeed. So listen, since this is the first program of the year 2025, we want to wish all of our listeners, all the best and welcome them back to another edition of Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, the place to find consensus, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. And of course, I want to send special greetings to my co-hosts here this evening, Sister Renee and Dr. Fergus. It's good to see you. One of the things that I think is on everybody's mind right now, of course, is the pardon of the Right Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And I know certainly it was on the mind of my colleague, Dr. Fergus, because a journalist from the Express reached out to me and he said that he had just finished speaking with Dr. Fergus about the matter. And so, Doc, perhaps you could say 2 words on that subject tonight to start the program for all our listeners on the outside. Are we celebrating a victory?
Yes, in a sense, but it's not a complete victory, of course. The law of pardon must be understood to understand what really happened. Marcus Garvey himself had first made a petition for a pardon, what they call at the time clemency. So this is over 100 years of struggle to get justice. And he had appealed to President Coolidge at the time. So several presidents would have had requests for pardons subsequently, including, as we know, Barack Obama. Even Donald Trump was asked, to pardon. Biden finally did it. But a pardon, in a sense, takes away the legal liabilities that you normally suffer if you are convicted, right? But it does not erase the criminal records as such. So the criminal record would still be there. And therefore, the next step must be either the legislature, that is Congress, because it's a federal crime, or the court, like the Supreme Court, in order to exonerate and expunge the criminal record and, in a sense, seal that case from public access. So nobody would be able to see the records future generations. Otherwise, the records are still there. But you see, the thing about it, the man is dead. He doesn't really benefit from it personally. He doesn't benefit from it. Yes. So the real benefit historically would be expungement of the record. That's as much as I would say for this week.
Yeah, what I want to say is that we have gotten news from across the African diaspora that, this pardon has caused a resurgence of interest in Garvey's historic achievements. And so there are some bookstores in the United States, for example, that where the demand for Garvey's books, particularly those written by a Trinidadian scholar, our very own Dr. Tony Martin, demand is outstripping supply. And so if for no other reason, that is a cause for celebration. We hope that catches on here in the Caribbean, and there is also a resurgence here in interest in his historic role in our in the freedoms that we enjoy today.
Yeah, the first thought that came to my mind when I heard the news was Tony Martin must be smiling in the grave or wherever he might be. That's the first thought that came to me. Yeah.
Indeed,
So you're
indeed.
right on track with that.
All right, so we're going to have another show, of course, where we'll talk a little bit more about Garvey, but tonight is not that night. So we can let our listeners know that when they come back to join us next week, we're going to spend more time speaking about this great man and the significance of this particular historic development. But tonight, we are going to talk with Brother David Abdullah and Sister Adeola about the SOE. That is the state of emergency, which has gripped Trinidad and Tobago since sometime in December, and of course made international news, made news all over the world. We want to find out from our two guests here, the leader of the movement for social justice and the young sociologist, Adeola Young, something about, how do we feel about this particular approach to crime? We know that this initiative comes out of a particularly grave set of circumstances where crime is concerned, and it is an attempt to address that particular issue. Is it an appropriate measure?
Well, good evening, Shabaka and
Greetings,
Adeola,
brother.
and of course all the others, Dr. Fergus and Renee and everyone else, and all those who are tuned in. Thank you for having me on the program once again.
And good evening, everyone. Thank you again.
Yeah. Well, okay. Before we begin, Brother David, let me just say that it was good seeing you. You and I, we happened to come back on a plane together from Caracas, where I think, brother, you were attending the forum. What is it?
The world. It had a long name. The World Anti-Fascist Festival.
Yeah. Well, I was there for the World Anti-Fascist Festival, but you were also there for another event.
Yes, I also attended the inauguration.
The global.
We both attended that same global anti-fascist event, and we traveled to Barbados and
the World Social Forum. Yeah, the World Social Forum took place. They had some meetings around the World Social Forum.
It was the Sao Paulo Forum, the Foro Sao Paulo working group. So I attended the working group meeting of the Sao Paulo Forum.
I see.
Which the Sao Paulo Forum brings together progressive, quote unquote, left political parties from Latin America and the Caribbean. So I attended that working group meeting.
Right, and of course, the major international headline coming out of that was that President Maduro said he would invade Puerto Rico. But of course, you were there when this conversation took place. What was your feeling on that?
Yeah, I mean, he said that really at the closing rally of the World Fascist Conference, and he said it very jocularly. It was in the context of Trump, who had already, although not yet president, had already made statements about Greenland and Panama and that kind of thing. So President Maduro kind of jocularly said, well, if that's what they want, we could invade Puerto Rico and therefore have Puerto Rican independence fulfilled. So it wasn't a serious comment.
Yeah. So were you surprised then to see the international media bend the reality in such a way?
No, because the international media, of course, has a narrative that they wish to pursue, which is to demonize President Maduro, the Bolivarian Revolution, and the transformations that have been taking place, and minimize the attacks by the colonial Monroe Doctrine U.S. state against Latin America, the Caribbean in general, and Venezuela and Cuba in particular. So no, I wasn't surprised by how the international media sought to portray it. But it was President Maduro made what he did say that was significant was that we are for peace, meaning Venezuela, we are for peace. We don't want war, but don't push us. And if you push us, we will defend our sovereignty. That to me was the most significant one. And he said not just Venezuela, but Nicaragua and Cuba as well. And that was the warning statement to the United States and others not to try and interfere further in the affairs of Venezuela as a sovereign independent state. And that wasn't picked up, but that to me was the major international statement, if you wish, by President Maduro that
From
afternoon.
that particular set.
Yeah.
Okay. And now moving on to the topic at hand tonight, we're talking about another subject that, of course, has stirred, has reached the attention of the international media. The SOE, the state of emergency here in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course, that's a government response to a crime situation that seems to be getting out of hand. Sister Adeola, let me bring you into the conversation here to get your views on this particular subject, on how you feel this has been executed. The police have said that they believe that it's a success. They've given statistics to demonstrate that. How do you feel about this particular approach to crime management?
So, before we even unpack the approach, we must begin at what a state of emergency actually means and what it signals for a country. And essentially, a state of emergency is a situation or a national disaster or danger in which the government would suspend your normal constitutional procedures in order to regain control. And keywords are regaining control. So this is a signal that the government has lost control of something. And in this case, it's crime, right? Trinidad and Tobago has called SOEs in the past. We are now on our sixth one. But there are many differences between now and then, which would indicate whether or not this strategy is something that would work for the long term, and most of them do not. But in our 6 states of emergencies, we would see notably the first 2 were protests of social justice. The last 2 were about crime and a pushback on criminal activity, right? So we don't have now a clear idea or political ideal of the groups that are and what they are actually, what the state has actually fighting against. What are these groups, political philosophy and things like that? We are essentially looking at physical violence because they have named that gang warfare and the threat to society is what they ideally call the SOE for. I think there's a lot of unpacking to do with what gang warfare actually means. And why is it that we're just looking at physical violence where there are so many other violences that exist that are not physical? And we look at white collar crime, we look at terrorist financing, we look at money laundering, and some of these things are clearly interlinked into criminal activity. And what is the strategy there? Obviously, it should have a long-term solution and an SOE for a couple of months to detain persons who may be on a lower level. From the outlook here, it's not really a strategy, it's just buying time. So that's how I feel about it.
Brother Abdullah, I think what Sister Young is saying suggests that there's some politics involved here, and perhaps this is not a sustainable approach.
Yeah, just one point of correction. This is the 8th state of emergency since independence. So there was one in 1965, limited, when CLR James was placed under house arrest, and there were strikes in sugar, and sugar workers were seeking to join the Oilfields Workers Trade Union. Then, of course, April 21st, 1970. Then there was one in November of 71 that lasted until June of 72. And then, of course, 1990. 1995, the limited one, where Mr. Manning wanted to place the Speaker of the House, Oka C. Paul, under house arrest, so she couldn't chair the proceedings of the House. And then 2011 by the Partnership to Deal Supposedly with Crime, and of course COVID in 2020, and then now this one. So yes, I agree that the states of emergencies are supposed to have dealt with situations where the government has lost control, most times to deal with a political or social moment, which they feel that is the only way they could deal with it. But in this case, and to deal with crime, and if it's similar to 2011, except that there is no curfew and there's no banning of public gatherings. Now, the government said they didn't want to impact on the economic activity of the country. The reality is that the emergency was proclaimed by the president on the 30th of December, which is the start really of carnival season. And you couldn't therefore have a curfew and ban public gatherings if you're going to have the carnival. And the government wouldn't have wanted to take a political chance of stopping the carnival. So the real measure of the success of the state of emergency is not simply in whether the police have arrested or detained rather more than 200 people, which is what the police high commander said, but whether any of those 200 plus persons will actually be charged and found guilty of some significant crime. Now, if you hold somebody with a AR-15, then they'll charge them with possession. But are they going to be charged under the anti-gang legislation? Because Adeola is correct. They spoke about gang violence and reprisals and high-powered weapons. So if persons are not charged with being involved in gangs, and if the number of high-powered weapons that are seized is minuscule in relation to the total number of illegal weapons that are out there, then at the end of the state of emergency, whether it is 2 weeks and 3 months, because initially you could only declare an emergency for 2 weeks and the parliament then approves it for 3 months, which they did last week, and then of course it could be extended for a further 3 months. But if at the end of that, the police can't say that they seized 50% of the illegal weapons out there or something like that, then when the emergency ends, the guns will still be out there in the hands of people, and they will use them, as has been happening during the emergency, because I think more than 20 people have already been killed, and we are on day 22, I think, of January, and more than 20 people have been killed.
Yeah. Well, the statistics are quite alarming. Out of a population of 1.6 million, we recorded 624 homicides last year, if my statistics are correct, making us perhaps one of the most violent countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, if we look at it per capita, murders per capita. So we do need to find real solutions to this problem beyond the state of emergency. So let's talk a little bit about what is behind, where are we? What when we talk about crime and finding ourselves in such a dire circumstances, what is the problem? Why is a country so small with such a small population, a beautiful country like ours, beset by such a difficult challenge when it comes to crime? Adeola, let's start.
Yeah. I think criminal activity is no longer localized, meaning that gangs have reached throughout the country and other Caribbean islands. So it's now an organized network. And with globalization and technology, it has become an institution with its own laws. It's practically a state within a state, where the government doesn't have to be directly opposed, but its authority is undermined. So we're talking about extortion of businesses and also legitimate business being a part of crime. And the level of financing is definitely a global enterprise, which requires, state legislation that speaks to that. And when you talk about public officials, we talk about businesses, even banks, and in terms of financing, what it is that we need to do is also invite actual criminologists who can unpack crime. Because criminology is a science in which we look at the structures of crime as well as the strategies, because some of the gang enterprises would not be involved in one type of crime, which would require one type of strategy. But when it comes to the technological advances where the leaders may not be in country for you to prosecute, then that's another type of partnership that may have to be through CARICOM or other state entities, where you would have to sit and see what the networks look like in terms of prosecution. So the fact that we've reached into the century of technology and globalization and connectivity, we have to ask ourselves, are we equipped with the laws to deal with such technology? Are we equipped with financing? As well as, are we equipped with the diplomatic strategies in order to have that type of partnership of prosecution? Because when we even think about our state prosecutors, we had the murder of Dana Cesar about 10 years ago. And now we have the other prosecutor that was killed, Mr. Randall Hector, on the 30th of December, right? So even thinking about our state officials and protecting them, that's also something that we need to take into account. And we also recognize that the level of crime is no longer localized. So
Yes.
can come up with localized
Sister
solutions.
Adeola is speaking quite clearly about Trinidad's strategic location for the transshipment of drugs from South America to markets in North America and Europe, and the way that how that impacts the country. But I think, Brother Abdullah, I want to ask you a deeper question. What makes us so susceptible to crime, whether it was transshipment of drugs or any other kind of criminal activity? What is it about us that makes us so susceptible as a society?
Yeah, and we're looking therefore at the internal factors. And you'll, I think, address the external or the global nature of transnational crime, and she's right about those things. The internal factor primarily is what we would call the neoliberal policy agenda that has been implemented over quite a number of years, which has caused the social structure of the society to begin to rupture, to break apart. And so let me just try to concretize that. At one level, we have an education system which for decades has resulted in half of our young people being failed. So when you get 40-50% of children who don't pass SCA, and then you get 40-50% of the children who ought to be sitting their CSEC exams after fifth form, not getting 5 subjects, including maths or English, and so on, then what you're doing is producing, the education system is producing generation after generation of young people who come out unable to find opportunities because they have failed their exams or they've been failed by the education system, opportunities for their own advancement. And therefore, they have no sense of hope in the future. They see no future for themselves and their families and so on. And they therefore go to live in the moment. So that is at one level. So we are creating a pool of young people to whom criminal activity becomes highly attractive. The second factor is that the state, which we had a social settlement, if you wish, where the state would have been responsible for the well-being of all of its citizens. So provision of education and healthcare and other support mechanisms and so on. What happened with structural adjustment or neoliberal policies over the years is that weakened at the same time that you had significant loss of jobs. Workers on the port were retrenched in the 90s, workers at PTSC, at WASA and so on. And therefore, many people who depended on that employment to sustain themselves and their families, that ended. Excuse me. And as a result of that, you had criminal gangs becoming, in a sense, a state within a state. So I remember once a major person who was a so-called community leader and so on, being killed, and the feedback on the ground was, well, who is going to finance the football team? And who is going to see about medical care for granny? And who's going to buy school books for the children and provide a Christmas tree? So that the gangs became a state within the state, providing support and sustenance for the community where the national state had failed. And that vacuum, therefore, enabled the growth of gangs as well. So several factors have contributed to what we have now, and the rise of inequality. That's what I want to make, where we have a few obscenely wealthy people at the top, and then we have a smaller number of people who are doing well, living very comfortably and so on, and then a large number of people who barely making it from payday to payday, and then a large number of people who are living in poverty. And that inequality is giving rise to a lot of instability, insecurity, and people who are insecure, some of them will get attracted to living fast and getting rich or dying trying.
Yeah, let me bring my co-host into the program, Dr. Fergus and Renee, at this point as we shift to the impact of the SOE in terms of, well, some commentators worry that it is, when we announce an SOE, the impact on investment in the country, the impact on tourism in the country, and all these kinds of things that rely on us having a particular type of being viewed in a particular light internationally are impacted.
Yeah. So I want to address two questions. Two of them comparative. One comparative in relation to Trinidad, the other to some other Caribbean countries. If we exclude 2020, I think it was 2020 state of emergency, and we go back to the previous regime, 2011, 2025, in terms of numbers arrested, we know there were thousands within a very short time. In 2011, 7,000 to 9,000 people were arrested. Virtually, I think about 2 people were prosecuted. In this dispensation, I don't know the numbers. I've been hearing 500, I'm hearing more. I asked a prison officer, a senior prison officer, where are these people? And he said to me, they're home. So apparently, there was nowhere to detain them properly, and therefore they may not be under current detention. I cannot verify. I'm telling you what I heard. So what I want to address in that regard is the impact on people itself, because I myself, the police in 2011 stormed my apartment around 2:30 in the morning because of a mistaken identity. But it was a traumatic experience because my daughter was sleeping in one of the rooms that they just passed me and went straight there to open the door and so on. So, that kind of thing, I know many people went through that. So this year, I'm not hearing anything like that happening, and at least not much. So how many people do they expect to prosecute? Because arresting people and detaining them simply to take them out of a particular environment, I don't think that is a solution in any way, can't be conceived as a solution, because they're going right back there as soon as the time expires. The other thing is, how is crime handled at that level in other parts of the Caribbean? In the Eastern Caribbean, crime is also rampant, violent crime. But I know for a fact that it was suggested in St. Vincent that the Prime Minister declared state of emergency, and he rejected it, partly because of the economic impact. But Jamaica has had state of emergency 2022, 2023, 2024, and we wouldn't be surprised if they have one again this year, right? Now, 2022, it was national. The other 2 were targeted to certain regions. I don't know what the impact was, but the Jamaicans are very well aware that 80% of the guns involved in violent crimes are coming from the United States. And therefore, the relation with the United States should be addressed. How could we stem the inflow of guns? Most of the guns are not only manufactured in the United States, they're exported from the United States. So the thing is, CARICOM ought perhaps to put pressure on the United States to do something about that, because, unless they stem the flow of guns, we are not going to have a reduction in gun violence. When the United States wanted to curb the importation of cocaine, they sent their military and CIA and all of that into Colombia, So what measures should we really take in regard to that aspect of crime? Because as Adeola said, there are other levels of crime. In Jamaica, you would hear statistics on white-collar crime, never in Trinidad, as if that does not exist. So yes, could you respond to the two propositions I have outlined, either of them or both of them, the Trinidad cases of state of emergency and the Caribbean context, state of emergency?
What I would say for this is that I remember we had the whole summit about crime and all the leaders that would have happened in Trinidad. Not sure which year, but it was recent, talking about crime as a public health issue. But we haven't seen a follow-up on what happened after that. So I think, transparency in terms of strategy, and we haven't seen a lot of transparency in this strategy of this SOE as well, looking at what happens after someone gets arrested, and what are the numbers. It's quite arbitrary and it's quite worrying. I think that we also still have to look at the legislation because, like I said, crime is very much interlinked with its financing, and it wouldn't be as strong if it didn't have the financing to purchase the guns. So I do think that it's a multi-pronged approach where we have things in place in such as legislation for white-collar crime and focus highly on that and what is the steps that we would take for public officials as well as persons who would have the financing to do such. And if we don't, then I don't think there would be a dent. We would be doing a SOE year after year and it would not have any type of reduction.
Yeah, I just to add a couple of points. In the case of 2011 state of emergency, there were quite a few people who were detained who then turned around after the emergency ended and sued the state for wrongful detention and won significant sums of money for wrongful detention. So it would be very interesting to see precisely what comes out of this state of emergency and whether there would be similar kinds of legal actions against the state for wrongful detention. But we'll have to wait and see. But I too am concerned about persons. I think some data was that over 900 people had initially been arrested, but some 200 and odd were in detention under the emergency powers. And therefore many people were initially arrested and then let go. So of those 200 and something, if we don't get persons charged with crimes, then the emergency really would not have had any significant impact. Now, in Jamaica, the law is different from Trinidad and Tobago in that the government can declare an emergency without, and do it selectively in different parishes, which is what they've been doing, without necessarily parliamentary approval for short-term extensions like we have here in Trinidad and Tobago. So the law is different. But in Jamaica this year, and I don't know if somebody could quickly Google it, the last figure I saw was that the number of murders in Jamaica jumped in January of this year over what it was last year. So the states of emergencies, there's several of them which you referred to, Dr. Fergus, have not actually resulted in a reduction in violent crime and murders in Jamaica. But somebody perhaps could get the actual data. Now, in terms of the guns coming in from the United States, you're absolutely correct. And Mexico, I think it was, took legal action in United States courts against the gun manufacturers for the manufacture and export of guns. Not that the manufacturers necessarily exported them, but facilitated a process of export of guns into Mexico for murders and other crimes to take place in Mexico. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of Caribbean countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, signed on to that legal action. I don't know where it is now, and given the nature of the criminal justice system and the civil justice system in the United States, where judges are politically appointed, one doesn't know where that is going to end up. But legal action actually was taken by countries against the gun manufacturers in the US. And as we know, CARICOM has been attempting and has had meetings, extensive meetings with the last administration in the US around the issue of strengthening the US intervention to prevent guns being exported out of the United States into CARICOM countries. Now, with the change in administration, we don't know where that is going to go either.
Of course, to his credit, our own Prime Minister is quoted in the international press as saying that, as criticizing the deliberate policy of the American Department of Commerce of exporting arms and ammunition. So it is a matter that is on the table. Brothers and sisters, our time is up for this segment. Unless there's something, a quick closing remark that you think is essential to get in, we want to bring this segment to a close and to thank you, Brother David Abdullah, for being with us here tonight on Indaba, the first program of the year, and you, Sister Adeola Young. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks. Just one very quick comment, Shabaka. As you know, the People's Roundtable, which I chair as convener, had a major civil society crime summit a year ago, and we produced our report late last year. And it really focuses not so much on crime prevention, although there's one issue with respect to white-collar crime that I want to say, and that is that the Financial Intelligence Unit does report every year to Parliament on thousands of suspicious transactions totaling billions of dollars, but there is little or no prosecution. And so we are calling for the FIU to be established as a standalone, constitutionally established body with investigative power so that those suspicious transactions can be investigated and prosecutions can take place.
Thank you, Brother David. And of course, we'd love to have you back sometime in the future to look more closely at your organization's report. Thank you very much, Sister Young. Good night. Yes, Dr. Fergus, another enriching conversation. And up next, of course, we have Dr. Asha Kambon. Welcome, Dr. Kambon. Good night. How are you?
Welcome, son. Welcome, Dr. Fergus. Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Good evening. And welcome back. Welcome back.
Yes,
of course, Dr. Kambon is sometimes a host on this program as well. But this evening, she's here to educate us about a key project aimed at transforming the lives of our youth. Dr. Kambon, correct me if I'm wrong, she's a planning and development expert and, of course, founding director of the Emancipation Support Committee. Last Tuesday, the ESC formally launched its youth agricultural program under the framework African Heritage Agricultural Center, with that acronym AFRA that I think would become a household acronym soon in Trinidad and Tobago, AFRHA. The centerpiece of that project is a 15-acre land grant. Again, I'm subject to correction there whether it's a grant or not, in the San Rafael area. Permit me to ramble just a little bit before, I let you in to say something about this program. At emancipation, as we know, Africans were primarily skilled in agriculture. Yet the plantocracy, the government, that is the local or colonial government, the imperial government as well, all conspired to deny African access to land. So that's a long legacy with the landlessness of the African in Trinidad and Tobago, which of course has a particular mentality that it will have inculcated over time that must be addressed in any program such as this. But I recall also when the Caroni 1975 limited lands were distributed, the Africans were conspicuously omitted from the list of beneficiaries. Although, if you look at the historical record and the names of the plantations that comprise that Caroni Limited as of that time that it was dissolved, Africans were the ones who developed those plantations. You look at the plantation names and so on, yet they were excluded. So this project is a very significant one historically in terms of a reparatory project, in a way turning back the hands of the clock, the historical clock, so that we can bring some meaningful approach to correcting a historical wrong. So, Dr. Kambon, tell us about this project. First, the acquisition of the land itself. Was that reckoning of government to do something for the International Year for Peoples of African Descent, or does it go back much further than that? And just tell us about this, the project itself, you know, the nature of the project, the scope of the project, the targeted group, and so on. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fergus. Yeah, so you put me in the hot seat there. Now, we really don't know what the thinking behind it was in terms of the government's own eventual agreement to allow the Emancipation Support Committee this grant of land. And initially, it's a license to use the land, which turns, once you've completed all the, what shall I say, all the official legalities around it, then in terms of surveying it and indicating how you plan to use it, etc., then it moves into a 30-year grant with the option of a second 30-year grant. So for us, that's excellent, because that's what we're talking about. We have a very long-term vision for the use of this land, and we're happy to be on that trajectory for the first 30 years and then the second 30 years. Now, the project is, it's, let me see, what shall I say? It's a holistic empowerment project for young people. So it's not, and some people thought maybe we were anxious to get land so that we ourselves could get into agriculture and turn over some money and, you know, sell produce, etc. That's really not the intent of this particular project. The intent of this particular project is to offer an opportunity for young people in the statistical group that is known as the NEET group. That is the young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are not in education, not in employment, and not in training. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this group, based on the way we designed the project, must come from what has been called, in our traditional knowledge, the Yoruba village or the Yoruba town. So we're looking at encouraging young people from what would be Mova, Laventil, Sealots, Gonzales, all of Belmont, and so on. Encouraging that age group who found themselves unable to somehow latch on to something in the society that gives them an opportunity for their own personal advancement, and to see the society and themselves as contributing to the society's development and see the society differently. So we've taken on that challenge. That's what we hope to be able to achieve. The group eventually our participants in the project, they will self-select. They will want to be part of it, and that's what we're hoping for. That they will say, yes, I want to be engaged in this effort of my own growth and development. That's the one thing we're looking for them to say, to be party, to join us as a primary stakeholder in the project. And the project, as I say, it really has a holistic approach. We are using agriculture, but climate smart technology to bring these young people into the process, where they will be offered the opportunity then to address their other life skills that maybe have not been addressed in the years that they spent in the formal education system before they found themselves outside of it. So we will offer some opportunities for that as well. But we hope to be able to encourage them to see life just very differently. The area of the country where this land exists is really a rich, beautifully green space. And I just envisioned those young people coming out to that space and feeling different immediately when their feet hit that ground. I think it's the word Afra comes from the Akan language, I think it is, and it means dust of the earth. And I just think that it's going to be a beautiful experience for these young people. So that's the first thing. It's a 15-year project we have in mind. So it's a long-term, as I say, long-term project. And we are really, really pleased and proud that the FC group of companies have bought into our long-term vision. Because lots of these things are 1 year, 3 months, 6 months. Where are we taking our young people in terms of their real development? Can we really address their human development in that short space of time? We don't think so. We think we need, if we are talking about transforming our young people so that they have a second chance to be contributors to this society, then we need time. So we are happy for this. And we're happy that some people have also, credited us and said, oh, great, this is a great idea, a long-term vision. We haven't heard that before. Everybody says, 1 or 2 year project. No. And so we expect to receive the support of the UE faculty of Food and Agriculture. They have said they're very, very pleased with the way the project looks and sounds and what we are likely to be able to do with it, as well the FAO. So we think, we'll be on the right track. The other thing I should say, in addition to telling you that it is who it's targeted to, the long-term vision of it, the other thing about the project is that we believe in partnerships. We understand that the Emancipation Support Committee won't be able to do it alone. I mean, a lot of the climate smart technology we don't possess. We have to ensure that those institutions that exist in the society that have those skills are willing and able. We're going to facilitate them sharing that with these young people who come into this process. Some at the end of the time they spend with us may say, well, boy, this agriculture thing ain't for me, but hopefully they would have learned other skills, some IT skills, some design skills, some marketing skills, some entrepreneurial skills, and just life skills about how you are as an African person. What is the essence? What does that mean? I always think back of when I myself personally learned about what it is that makes us African, besides the color of our skin and the texture of our hair and our facial features. What is it really? And it is our deep cultural belief in that sharing, in that giving, in that, respect for our elders and our children. And let's see if we can't give these young people a new look at life. That's really what the project is all about, and we will use.
Yeah. So Dr. Kambon, 15 acres are not a lot of land. So clarify for us. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I believe that people are not going to be asked to relocate to the particular area. Noticeably, the word is not farm, agricultural farm or estate, but center. So what is behind the name? Is it that this project is really a teaching project and not a commercial project where the recruits are going to expect a little piece of land that they would farm intensively and make money out of it? What exactly is the center? Is it like a training center?
Yes, definitely. It is a training facility. The young people will be able to participate in farming, will learn all the techniques, they will earn some income. If all goes well and the climate doesn't dry us out or flood us out, they will understand what the processes entail. How do you market? How do you process? What are the best things? If those who want to take on the agricultural endeavors then will be able to go and apply for the land that's available through the government now, apply for those grants and get on with it. But we think that there is need for helping those young people who seem not to be able to latch on to the training or latch on to the land or latch on to something in this society. There is a space for them to be trained, to be given the opportunity to know themselves and then make the decision, what do they want to do with the rest of their life? Because 16 to 24, you've still got the whole rest of your life ahead of you. Unfortunately, young people today think that life ends at 30, so they're rushing to a dead end, dead, literally. And we want to avoid that. There are far too many young people. We want them to see that there's a different possibility in life.
Yeah, okay. I have two more questions before I invite Shabaka to come in. I'll ask them one at a time. One is in terms of the local youth. That is the youth around the area where the land is, around the San Rafael area. We have to be logical that if the youth in that area are not involved, there'll be a risk for security with whatever crops you put down on the ground. I mean, we have to be realistic. So what plan do you have to co-opt the youth of the area where the land is located?
Absolutely. We absolutely understand that there's going to have to be an integration of these young people in the effort. We have a number of offers and programs that we think once we get off the ground, we'll be able to initiate so that young people from the community can participate in the process. In addition to the usual things like farming exchange, farmers exchange and so on. What we produce, we're willing to let you have to sell in your markets and so on. So we have some possibilities, and definitely we're going to work with the young people in those areas as well. We're not, let me say one of our goals and the goals of the project team, the small group that will be working on the project, is to ensure that the community, that the resident community, we call it, that's different from our community of participants that we're drawing participants from, but the resident community is integrated and feels a part of the process that we're engaged in. So yeah, that's high on our agenda.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to ask you about the crops and whether the African in the title of the project would suggest something about the type of crops you're going to select. But Shabaka is here, and I'm fully aware that we have another guest to bring into the program before we close. So I would beg Shabaka's consent on this one. To please consider the other guests. We want to have the other guests in before. Yes. So just 1 minute. 1 minute response, Dr. Kambon. What kind of crops you envisage would be the centerpiece of the project? What kind of crops you're thinking about?
Yeah, so it's a mixture. It's going to be a mixture of short-term crops, long-term plantation crops, like whether we choose cocoa, coffee, citrus, avocado, whatever. There's some of that thinking. And then the short-term things are thinking of things like bene, possibly some of the Moruga Hill rice, and so on. So that we are focusing on, as far as is possible, introducing the African varieties and African crops that we had done so traditionally. Because one of our colleagues who was with us indicates that there's a good market for those as well, a good international market with good prices. So we look at all of that, but we are also going to be guided by the University of the West Indies examination of the soil to tell us what we should plant, where, and how. So we have not made a hard and fast rule about what we're planting yet, because we want to be guided by the soil tests and be scientific in that regard.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to end, and to thank you. And I'm sure we are going to have to bring you back to continue informing us about the development of this significant and very historical project. Shabaka, thanks for your indulgence on this one. We welcome Baba to the program. And because I wanted you to have a say in the project, you can have a first say with Baba on the Obaala Festival 2025. Yeah, Shabaka.
Yeah, well, let me just say that for the sake of our listeners, that the brother who will be managing that project, Dr. Fergus, is Brother Chikamose. And he was one of the youth leaders in 1970. He wasn't part of the senior group of revolutionaries that were imprisoned during the state of emergency and so on. He was one of those contemporary of people like Josanne Leonard, who kept the movement going while the elders were detained. The young people kept the movement going. So he has that tradition. I'm sure he's going to be bringing that Africanness to the project, and of course, are looking for ways to include as much African plants and so on as possible in the project. So that's something exciting to look forward to. And now I want to welcome brother, this special brother to the program tonight.
Oh, yeah.
He's been doing something quite extraordinary over a number of years now. He's been leading a group out of Woodbrook to a special annual procession in celebration of Obaala. Welcome, brother. Welcome to
Yes.
the program.
Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to be here.
I see your dress all in white tonight. And that
yes.
me...
Actually, I'm advertising the festival.
Right. So, for the sake of our listeners now, because we're coming from a colonial experience, and we'd like to be able to give our listeners a brief introduction to some of the cultural aspects of Africa that not yet properly mainstream in their society. And so, tell us a little bit about Obaala and where he fits into the Orisha or Ifa cosmology.
Okay. Well, first to begin, I'll introduce myself. I'm Obaala of Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Ifa Benjo Oriomi Orishabemi. I was charged with the task of, I initiated in Trinidad back in the late 70s, early 80s. And after that, I went to Africa. I was initiated there also as Obaala. And I was given a title as Ojeshi Obaala, which is the divine messenger of Obaala. And I was assigned the responsibility of taking the worship of Obaala back home and spreading it all through the West. So since then, I've been doing that. We have held the Obaala Festival for 23 years now. I mean, we started very small, but now it's a signature event on the calendar of Orisha events, so we look forward to it every year in January. Obaala in the pantheon of Orisha worship is the old man. He's the father of the Orisha. At least that's what they say. He was one who witnessed creation. So he's responsible for the eyes and the nose and the ears and the brain, that type of thing. But he is the one who brings peace and love. He brings reason. He's a little old man, he brings reason to the table, so I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
When I was in Cuba, and I spent time with the Santeria devotees there, the equivalent of the Orisha community in Trinidad and Tobago, and they have this syncretic way of engaging in the commemoration and veneration of the Orisha pantheon. And a lot of it is done within the context of Catholic churches and so on. And so you find that a lot of the Orisha deities there are paired with various figures within the Catholic faith. And Obaala is always paired with Jesus Christ himself, as opposed to Obaala, who is paired with God. Can you tell me anything about that?
We reached to the point now where we have to get rid of the saints. You know what I mean? And this is a radical statement here. That service purpose. But now we out in the open now. So I don't want to compare Obaala with Jesus. It's like saying God and Olodumare. It's two different things. You know what I mean? So let us concentrate on the real Africanization of the word Olodumare as being that omnipotent, as opposed to the God that was defined by the same colonialists. And you know what I mean? We have, it's something different. Obaala is not Jesus. You know what I mean? Obaala is Obaala.
Well, of course, that is the case. But what I was trying to do really tonight was to sort of help those listeners who are coming to Orisha for the first time, who are hearing about Ifa for the first time, who are just beginning to try to grapple with what it means, to relate it to something that they understand. But before we get more into that conversation, let's start by telling people when this festival is and what they could expect to see. Now, I have seen some of the beautiful images that come
Yes.
out of the annual procession in Woodbrook. But again, most people would not have seen it. So describe what to expect and when to expect. And you and I are going to talk a little bit more.
Okay, so the festival is on Saturday, the 25th of January. It starts at 12 o'clock, 12:01. You know, I'm saying 12:01 because what happened, people come early and they can go around to the shrines and, you know, interact with the shrines. So that will give them
And
about
where
an
are we?
hour.
Where are they going to come to interact with the shrine?
Oh, it's 51 Alberto Street in Woodbrook.
So 51
Yes.
Alberto Street.
Yes.
For those of you, I know it's 9 o'clock now, so we're about to lose our listeners on 91.1. So let's quickly get it in. 51
right, so
Alberto Street, 12
in
o'clock.
Woodbrook,
12
yes.
midday.
Between Peter Avenue and Warren Street. It's the Ita Osa Igbo Itapa Shrine. But we will also occupy the square, the Siget Square that is obliquely opposite the shrine. We are occupying that for the day. We have a family day. We have a craft market that starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and goes all through the day. At the shrine itself, we'll start 12 o'clock. We'll have prayers, Iwori, we'll have singing. We want to present scholarships. What we do every year is we try to present at least 2 scholarships to youths in the community, and we recognize some of the elders in the community who have made contributions to the community.
Yeah. When we talk about scholarships, what are we speaking about exactly?
Well, it's small. We ain't big, you know what I mean? But we could usually we do a book something. You know, we'd help you with your books. You know, next term you get now we help you with your books, and it's all about money. So we'd give you a check. You know, not a big check, you know, but
right.
You know. And we present the elders with, sometimes we give them little gifts, we give them books, and we make sure that they are recognized in the community. So, you know, we'll be on that part, trying to bring love and peace and joy. At 4 o'clock, we leave the shrine and we go around the block, 300-400 people. We play drums and we sing and we bring joy and peace and love to the community. Because, and not only that, not this community, but when people come, they will take whatever they get and take it to their communities and spread that energy, you know. But it's a nice experience, and also we are reliving these old traditions, you know, that come out of Africa. You know, I was fortunate to be there a couple of times and learn, and was taught by some of my elders, you know, the things that we can do to keep the energy alive. You know, we might be able to do things exactly as they do in Africa because they have their sacred spots. They have Ajia the market, you know, you go to Obaala, Igbo, you know, so but we don't have those historical sites, but we still manage to keep it together, you know.
Yeah, well, I would say that the traditions here in the Caribbean or in the Americas, I've seen the traditions all the way as far north as New Orleans, and perhaps as far south as Salvador, Bahia in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would say that you know, there are those within the community who feel that the traditions as they have evolved here in the Americas have their own special significance and their own special place within the wider African tradition. And they must not be displaced necessarily by some of the older traditions that have existed on the continent before. They have a value in of themselves.
Yeah, you know, sometimes they say, oh, you know, you're doing this, but what is coming out, we're trying to create something or recreate something, you know, that was so beautiful and things that the elders experienced, and you know, we're trying to recreate that love, that energy.
And based on the images that I've seen of the event, you're doing a great job, Baba. And
I've been trying.
And you're fulfilling your, you know, that which you have been asked to fulfill.
We have a lot of children. We have a lot of children as well. We have children, you know, some differently able, but we cherish them because those are Obatala's children.
Yes, and your work goes a long way, yourself and the other elders, to helping us to really live our creed in the society, where every creed and race will find equal place.
It's so important, and especially now. And one of the, well, I don't know if you saw the video, but I was saying we have to find the message in the mess. You know what I mean? We're in a mess, so we still need to find the message in the mess. So don't get too involved in the mess itself. You know what I mean? You know, so that's basically it. Sit down and think about things. Make good decisions. Make decisions that would last for thousands of years. Because if our right thing is a right thing, you know what I mean? That's going to stand by itself. The truth is going to stand by itself. So try to make good decisions as leaders. Try to make decisions that would help the people. You know?
Yeah. So, Baba, on that note, let us remind our listeners now we're well into Indaba overtime. But those
yes,
who
I know.
Okay, on the internet, those who are with us on social media here in Trinidad and Tobago, across the Caribbean, and indeed across the world, remind them if they could make it this weekend, the date, the time.
Right, Obaala Festival. Obaala Festival, Saturday.
Obaala Festival.
25th of January. That is this coming Saturday. We start at 12 at the shrine. We start with, you know, like I just said, the prayer. And we also have a craft market and a family day. Obliquely opposite the shrine, there's Siget Square. So we occupy the whole square with tents and drums. And it's really going to be a nice event. You know, you see all the little children playing, and it's really, really nice. Dress in white.
Dress in white. Okay, you see? All right, we're going to have to make sure we get that information out. All right, because white is the color of Obaala.
Yes, yes.
Indeed. So it's not going to be hard to find. It's in Woodbrook this Saturday. No. Go down and join brothers and sisters. Learn something new. Participate in something special. The ancient tradition of our ancestors. Thank you very much, brother.
Thank you very much. Indaba.
Yeah, man. Now let me bring Dr. Fergus and Renee back.
When I initiated in LAFA, I was given the task of bringing forward the worship of Obaala. That was what I was assigned to do by my then initiate Baba, Olosolo Gundudu. And since then we have had Obaala festivals, not like it is now. But you know, like maybe 5 people, 8 people, 6 people, you know what I mean? You know, that kind of thing. But it grew into something that was is now a signature event on the calendar of Orisha events. We give scholarships to youths in the community who have done well. We give scholarships to those esteemed elders who we consider, you know, as good elders and who have made contributions to the community. And we bring light and love to the community. The festival is on Saturday, the 25th of January. It starts at 12 noon. We try to start early because people can mill around the yard and go to the orishas and, you know, and make their contribution to the ancestral tree, you know, where they would put their ancestors' name and stuff like that. So we go around the block and we bring love and light and healing. So we want to see as many people as possible. Please come out. We want to see everybody come out. Although you should devotees, it doesn't matter. Obaala is part of everybody, you know. So we want to share that energy. We want to share that light. 51 Alberto Street, Woodbrook, and Port of Spain, between Arapita Avenue and Warren Street.
So that is the video produced there by the Ile Osa Igbo Itapa Shrine. 51.
Yeah, Shabaka, I wanted, if I got the opportunity, I would have asked him about the name of the shrine, Ita Osa Igbo Itapa. and particularly the Igbo name in the shrine. I was curious why Igbo and not Yoruba. And yeah, what's the connection there?
Very interesting.
So perhaps,
indeed.
Perhaps our sister Zakia could type in something for us, because she's also a devotee of Orisha, of the Ifa tradition.
And maybe
What the Igbo aspect is doing there. I know the Igbo share some aspects of Yoruba culture, but I'm not aware that they're devotees of Obaala. So the Igbo aspect there is an interesting, intersection of African ethnicity that's very common in Trinidad. So I don't know if it is coincidental, deliberate, or historical in some sense.
Interesting question, Dr. Fergus. And Dr. Fergus, now as we talk in history, we're talking for the rest of Indaba over time, we're going to talk about the coat of arms of Trinidad and Tobago, the recent decision or the recent approval by the government of a new design for the coat of arms, which includes the steel pan. And of course, the new design is creating a lot of controversy. There's a lot of negative feedback, not just about the change itself, which is for me, a sad thing, but also about what has been produced, how that change has been realized. Significant amount of complaints about how it has been realized. And Dr. Fergus, before I turn this over to you, let me say that I had the misfortune of going to a school to do a presentation within the last few days where 99% of the students felt that it was not a good idea to remove Columbus's 3 ships from the coat of arms. And I'm not talking here, I'm talking about African students, so it was a hell of a thing. Now, let me just say this. I saw an image there flash across the screen of the old coat of arms and one that purports to be the new one. But of course, that is not the official.
Well, not the old one, and that one is still the legal one. So that's the existing one and the proposed one.
The proposed one, but we have to get the right image, because the image that I saw a minute ago, that image there is not the official image. That image was one of those images that was brought to the fore, as a mock-up, as a potential image of the coat of arms. That's not the official image. So, Renee, behind the scenes, you're going to have to find the official image that has been, what I understand, has been acknowledged or accepted by the powers that be.
Yeah, that one doesn't have the pan sticks in them. That one doesn't have it.
No, that pan.
The one that she just projected there doesn't have. Yeah, it's not the last. It's not the one that was endorsed by Parliament.
Exactly. The one that we just saw there is actually better than the one that was endorsed by Parliament, according to the vast majority of commentators, particularly those from the artistic community, those who produce logos and things like that, have stated quite clearly that there's something very problematic, and they've given clear reasons and rationales for the problems they see. But Dr. Fergus, let's start here. We know that the 3 ships are not the only problematic features of the coat of arms. So let's sort of share with our listeners and illuminate, the other features of the coat of arms that are problematic. Let's start there.
Yeah, but just a brief comment on the pan and your visit to the school. Shabaka, whatever they put the pan on and however beautifully and artistically represented it would have been, there would be protests, there would be complaints by certain sectors of the community, right? So it is not just the art. I think that is just an excuse to criticize the art and even the artist. But I don't think that's the problem that is irritating a lot of people. I think it is the pan itself. just as you would have found out, or you would have been told by the students that they preferred the three ships, Columbus's three ships. I think that has to do not just with the conditioning, but one with the fact that people generally are resistant to change, particularly iconic symbols. They are resistant until they get accustomed to the new thing. Recall the change of name, even though it was such a generic name to replace Milner Hall, and the students there, were very upset because some of them actually personalized the identity of Milner. They saw themselves as Milnerites, and I recall one student saying that when they graduate, they would not feel as if they had been to the university because they would no longer be able to identify with Milner and being a Milnerite. It is that kind of emotional attachment that some people have to anything that is new, particularly iconic things. So one, yes, we know it may have to do with the ships itself, but it has to do with change.
Yeah,
it has to do with change, and it also has to do with the steel pan as an instrument, and the way that the origin of the steel pan, and the way that the steel pansmen were treated as a pariah in the society and so on. All that legacy people have as baggage still,
Yeah, let me ask you a
They
question.
have that as baggage, and they're still carrying that baggage somehow internalized, in the mind, because subliminally all those images probably have not been erased, and people are reacting to some of those things.
So you don't think it has anything to do with the way that the change was announced on a political platform by the Prime Minister?
No, I think I commented on that. Even if the Prime Minister had announced the change in Parliament, in an address to the nation in Parliament or wherever, the reaction would have been the same. If you look and see the quarters that the reaction is coming from, the reaction would have been the same, Shabaka. They would have just added another excuse to the criticism that they have.
Let me add another conversation. It is my experience that when confronted with the facts about the three ships, people tend to change their position, as was the case with many of the students whom I spoke to this week. They simply were not aware that these three ships represented the crime against humanity, the horrendous crime against humanity that they did. They didn't understand that this was a celebration of colonial violence. It was a celebration of genocide. And so is it not fair to say that the people of this country have not been given the information they would need to process the change?
No, but Shabaka, that is also a condemnation of our school system. You have the school system ought to have teachers that are enlightened enough to understand what the three ships symbolize, and from the time the announcement was made, that should have been part of the concern of teachers in those schools, that now we are going to have a national anthem. After all schools carried the coat of arms, and therefore it was incumbent on those schools and teachers in particular to say something about this. Was an opportunity, a teaching moment. So it is really, an indictment on teachers, on the school system, on the attitude of schools towards, significant symbols in the society, and when it relates to change, it's an indictment. I don't think it's just the government. The government usually have their style of doing things, but it's up to the school and the NGOs and so on, like you would have done, to take up this matter as soon as it was announced. And we have done an immense amount of educating of the public, in that regard. So teachers are informed. I'm sure that teachers are informed about those things. And if they weren't, then they're supposed to educate themselves and bring that enlightenment to the students.
Yeah, no, well, I'm absolutely certain that the teachers lack the necessary information themselves to be able to deal with the issue, because they were educated into that celebration and to believing that the coat of arms, as it was an appropriate symbol. And
but Shabaka, I don't accept that. I don't accept that. We have been campaigning for the removal of Columbus. Most schools now acknowledge that Columbus should be removed. Columbus didn't fly down here. He didn't walk. He came in ships. And it is obvious that the ships would have had some connection to Columbus. It's obvious. It's a kind of laziness if that was really the case. It's a kind of laziness on the part of teachers. But I refuse to believe that the teachers really could not make the connection.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the other symbols in the coat of arms now that are problematic, as our time is running down on us. Dr. Fergus, pick the one for you that is most problematic outside of the three ships.
No, well, okay, I particularly take offense to the crown, because the crown represents imperialism in a major way. It represents imperial expansion, militarism. It represents imperial domination, and it's a medieval symbol. It's in a lot of European heraldry, and therefore they should have eliminated that as well. We can talk about the hills, which also misrepresent the country, but that isn't as offensive as the medieval symbols at the top. Now, they removed the ships, but they kept the steering wheel for the ship on top, right? So that is another symbol that may be connected to Columbus. The steering wheel, that wheel at the top, there is a ship's wheel. And therefore, we could have taken offense to that. The crown, of course, we know in a more direct way would have represented Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, but royalty, imperialism, and all of that is captured in the crown. I don't see some. Now, I have tracked down all the coat of arms in CARICOM, all of them, not only in English-speaking colony. I have all of those in one folder. So I look at them. From 1979, around there, when St. Lucia, I think, got independence, the coat of arms don't have these things on them. There's a certain consciousness that the artists after that would have brought to the designing of coat of arms. They're not there. A lot of local, elements or motives, as they're called, are enshrined in those things. So before that, particularly as before 1966, right, which would mean Jamaica, but even Jamaica is not as imperialistic as the Trinidad one, you see. So you would see that, and the ships or boats. Some people have represented canoes instead of European ships to symbolize, the native navigation. Which would have been responsible for the first settlements in the Caribbean. But the element of that cap that represents European heraldry should have been eliminated. And it should have been done now, because we don't expect the government to go back and design another coat of arms. It should have been done now.
Yes, indeed.
That is the problem I have. It should have been done now. So there should have been some kind of. The government always liked public consultation to delay things. But this is one time when the public should have had some say, even if it was for a limited time, to express their views on it. Yeah, I think it would have done some good.
Well, absolutely. I want
not to set up a commission or something like that to delay the whole thing, because once you hear committee and so on, the public could have been invited to submit their views to some source within the office of the Prime Minister and so on. you know,
Yeah.
and he could have taken some of those things on board. You didn't need a committee, you didn't need a commission or anything like that. Those things normally mean interminable delays, and sometimes it's a strategy to do nothing.
Indeed. Well, for me, the worst symbol that we have left there. I mean, you've talked about the crown already. So, the three hills. The three hills reifies a dubious feature of the landscape. Nobody can tell me where those three hills are. There's no one in Maruga, nobody in South. You know, in fact, when I went down to Maruga to talk to people down there, they broke out in a huge fight because some people thought they knew where it was, others said it wasn't there, and so on. Nobody could tell me where these three hills are. But not only that, you know, we know from our research that before Columbus left Spain on that third voyage, that he had agreed that the very next territory that he came upon, he would name after the Trinity. And so he would have seen those three hills wherever he went. And the other aspect of it is the fact that these three hills reify the perverse and absurd act of renaming territories by Europeans. So it's not just that they represent a dubious symbol that doesn't exist. Really, it's a mythological feature of the landscape, but they also celebrate and reify the absurd act of renaming territories, something that the Caribbean is right now trying to overcome, as a number of Caribbean territories have started to utilize their indigenous names alongside their colonial names. And so that for me is another very, very problematic feature of the coat of arms. I also want to say that the coat of arms, in terms of how it comes into being, makes it even more problematic. So you have these 7 prominent individuals who are tasked with producing this coat of arms at independence in 3 weeks. And of course, only one of those individuals ends up producing the coat of arms all by himself. And Carlisle Chang says in an interview, the one who produces the coat of arms, that the very first meeting that he called, it was only 3 people that showed up, and the 2 other people were both English, 2 Englishmen and himself. Nobody else even bothered to show up to the first meeting, and the others made very little contribution thereafter. He also points out, interestingly enough, that when he finishes his 2 top designs and he submits them to the government then sends them to the College of Heralds in the United Kingdom. And he says that none of his designs featured the 3 ships or the 3 hills. And those features were actually imposed on our coat of arms at independence by the College of Heralds in the United Kingdom. So those are all things that we must take into consideration as we try to decide what to do from here. But I agree with you, Dr. Fergus. I think it is a tragedy that these changes have been done without proper consultation. Again, you know, I see this as you know, a continuation of the same approach that the government took with the hair issue. And you know, and that approach, which ignores civil society, removes us, diminishes civil society, their contribution and so on, you know, usually results in a diminished transformation. So instead of including those organizations that had pushed for transformation, for the liberation of African hair, the end to discrimination against natural African hair in the school system, for 2 decades or more, they decided to marginalize and sideline those groups when they had meetings, and came up with a legislation that was not fit for purpose, and that leaves more children exposed to discrimination. And here again, you have groups that have been organized, like the Caribbean Freedom Project, you and I, the work that we've been doing since 2017, to remove, to end the open glorification of Christopher Columbus in his statues, on the coat of arms, and so on. And our work was submitted. We submitted our work to the government committee, but we could have been invited to consult on the coat of arms, to discuss some of these features, so we could all perhaps sing from the same hymn book. But the government and the powers that be in the Caribbean tend to function in a colonial style, as if, according to one commentator, like the old governor from England. They come here and they speak down to the population. They're not really interested in hearing what you have to say. And of course, they want to take on the glory of the transformations on themselves without acknowledging the work of the activists who have brought these issues to the fore and put their body and their resources on the line for these changes, these historical changes that have to be made.
Yeah, we have exhausted our extra time, but just one more item because people might be listening out there. The shield is another objectionable icon. The shield, like the crown, represents militarism, medieval militarism, knighthood, crusading, and so on. Violence, in other words. So you have symbols of violence here captured in the coat of arms, and those should have been expunged in any new design of a national symbol. So I just want to end with that. We are at the top of the extra half hour. So I think we have had a useful discussion, perhaps not sticking to the original program, which we are going to hear about now. Nevertheless, we are going to have to look at the program again at some point in time. But next week, the Africa Report is back. And we are going to look at the revolution in the Sahel. And we are also going to have a live interview from Burkina Faso. So look out for that. It's very interesting. The revolution is expanding. It's growing in popularity. It's growing in terms of what we might call alliances, in addition to the core republics. Many other states have thrown in their support for the revolution as well, including, surprisingly, Ghana under the new regime. So we are going to capture that in the Africa Report next week.
Please join us again next week for another edition of Indaba. Same time, same place, on radio and on social media, YouTube, on Facebook, etc. So please join us next week when we deal with Burkina Faso. Good night.